Clara Whitmore pressed her hand over her daughter's mouth as heavy boots thundered across the porch above them. Beneath the floorboards of her own home, hiding like animals, she could feel 7-year-old Lily trembling against her chest. 5-year-old Tommy whimpered, and 11-year-old Emma pulled him closer, her young eyes filled with a terror no child should know. The year was 1879, and Clara's own brother had just sold her to the highest bidder. Tonight, she would either escape into the Wyoming blizzard with her 3 children or lose them forever. If you want to know how this widow and her children survived that terrible night, subscribe to my channel and follow their journey to the very end. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The cellar door creaked. Clara stopped breathing. Above her head she heard Silas's boots pause mid-step. Her brother's voice, once familiar and warm, now carried a cruelty that made her skin crawl. "Clara." He drew out her name like a curse. "I know you're still here. Cornelius is waiting, and he ain't a patient man." She pressed Lily closer, feeling her daughter's hot tears soak through her dress. Tommy squirmed in Emma's arms, confused and frightened. At 11 years old, Emma shouldn't have to be this brave. But she held her brother with steady hands and kept her eyes fixed on her mother, waiting for a signal. The boots moved again, away from the cellar door. "Check the barn," Silas ordered someone. "Virgil, take the root cellar. She's got those brats with her, she can't have gone far." Clara's heart seized. The root cellar. That's exactly where they were hiding. She had maybe 2 minutes before Virgil found them. 2 minutes to decide whether to surrender or run into a blizzard that had already claimed 3 lives this winter. She looked at her children's faces in the darkness. Emma trying so hard to be strong. Lily shaking like a leaf. Tommy sucking his thumb the way he did when he was scared. William, she thought, addressing her dead husband in her mind. "I'm so sorry. I tried to keep them safe. But William was 2 years in the ground, and sorry wouldn't save her babies." "Emma," Clara whispered, her voice barely a breath. "The back passage. The one your father dug." Emma's eyes widened. She remembered. William had carved out an escape tunnel years ago, back when tensions with the Sioux were still high. It emerged 50 yards from the house behind the old oak. "It's blocked," Emma whispered back. "The snow. We dig." Clara shifted Lily to her hip and grabbed Tommy's hand. Emma moved first, her small body navigating the cramped space with the ease of a child who'd played hide-and-seek in these cellars all her life. Behind them, the cellar door groaned. "Mrs. Whitmore." Virgil's voice echoed down. "Boss says you better come out now. Things'll go easier if you cooperate." Clara didn't answer. She pushed the children forward, her own body, scraping against rough-hewn wood as they squeezed into the narrow tunnel William had built. The darkness was absolute. Lily whimpered, and Clara pressed a kiss to her hair. "Hush now, baby. Mama's got you." "I'm scared," Lily breathed. "I know. But we're gonna be brave together, ain't we?" A small nod against her shoulder. They crawled. Clara's knees screamed against the frozen dirt, and twice she had to stop when Tommy started crying. But Emma kept moving ahead, and Clara kept pushing forward, and finally, they hit the wall of snow that blocked the tunnel's exit. "Dig," Clara ordered. 4 pairs of hands clawed at the packed snow. It was ice cold, burning their fingers, but they dug anyway. Behind them, distant shouts echoed through the tunnel. "They found the passage," Emma gasped. "Faster!" Clara's fingers broke through. Cold air rushed in, carrying snowflakes that stung her face. She widened the hole, then pushed Emma through first. "Run to the tree line. Don't stop. Don't look back." Emma hesitated. "Mama, go." Emma grabbed Tommy and ran. Clara shoved Lily through the hole, then squeezed her own body out, scraping skin and tearing her dress. The blizzard hit her like a wall wind, so fierce it nearly knocked her down, snow so thick she could barely see her children's shapes just yards ahead. She ran. Behind her, a man's voice bellowed from the tunnel. She's out! They're heading for the trees! Clara didn't look back. She scooped Lily into her arms and ran harder, her bare feet. She'd lost her shoes somewhere in the cellar, burning against the snow. Emma was ahead, dragging Tommy, her breath coming in white gasps. The tree line was close. So close. A gunshot cracked through the storm. Clara stumbled, but kept running. The bullet had gone wide, lost in the blizzard, but it wouldn't be the last. "Mama!" Tommy screamed. "Keep running, baby!" They hit the trees. The forest swallowed them, the thick pines breaking the wind's fury. Clara pulled her children behind a massive trunk, pressing them all together, trying to quiet their ragged breathing. Voices carried through the storm. Silas's men searching. "Spread out. She can't have gone far with those kids." Clara's mind raced. They were in their nightclothes. No coats, no food, no weapons. The temperature was dropping by the minute. Even if they evaded Silas tonight, the cold would kill them by morning. But staying meant watching her children handed over to Cornelius Briggs's care while she was forced to marry that cold-eyed snake. Silas had made the arrangement clear. Clara would be Cornelius's wife, and the children would be sent to a workhouse in Cheyenne. Out of sight, out of the way, over her dead body. "Emma," Clara breathed. "The Tanner place. How far?" Emma's teeth were chattering. 2 miles, maybe more. Too far. They'd freeze before they made it halfway. "What about the old Miller cabin? The abandoned one?" "Closer. Half-mile, maybe." Clara nodded. It was their only chance. "Stay low. Follow me." They moved through the forest like ghosts, Clara carrying Lily, while Emma half-dragged Tommy through the deepening snow. The storm was a blessing and a curse. It hid them from Silas's men, but it was also slowly killing them. Lily had stopped shivering. That was bad. Clara knew enough about winter to know that when you stopped shivering, death was close. "Stay awake, baby," Clara whispered fiercely. "Talk to me. Tell me about the doll Papa made you." She's got yellow hair," Lily mumbled. "Like me." "That's right. What else?" "A blue dress. Emma helped me sew it." "She did. Emma's real good at sewing, ain't she?" Lily nodded weakly. Her eyes were drooping. Clara walked faster, ignoring the agony in her frozen feet. The Miller cabin had to be close. It had to be. "Mama?" Emma's voice was barely audible. "I see it." Through the swirling snow, a dark shape emerged. The cabin was half collapsed, its roof sagging under years of snow. But it had walls. It had shelter. Clara pushed through the door, which hung crookedly on its hinges. Inside was dark and cold, but out of the wind. She set Lily down and immediately started searching for anything they could use. An old blanket, moth-eaten but intact. Some rags. The remains of a fire pit with a few pieces of kindling nearby. Emma helped me get the little ones wrapped up. They huddled together beneath the blanket, 4 bodies pressed close for warmth. Clara rubbed Lily's arms and legs, trying to restore circulation. Tommy had fallen asleep against Emma's shoulder, his small body exhausted. "Mama," Emma whispered. "What's going to happen to us?" Clara pulled her eldest close. "I don't know, baby, but I ain't letting anyone take you from me, not ever." Uncle Silas said, "Your uncle ain't your family anymore." Clara's voice hardened. "Family don't sell family. Family don't threaten children. Whatever he was before, he ain't that now." Emma was quiet for a moment. "I miss Papa." Clara's throat tightened. "Me too, baby. Every single day." He would have stopped Uncle Silas. He would have tried. Clara stroked Emma's hair. "But Papa's gone, and now it's just us. We gotta be strong for each other. Can you do that?" Emma nodded, her young face set with determination that broke Clara's heart. They sat in silence, listening to the storm rage outside. Clara's mind was racing, trying to plan their next move. They couldn't stay here long. Silas would search every abandoned structure in the area once the storm cleared. They needed to get to town to someone who could help. But who Silas had spent months turning Pine Ridge against her, spreading rumors that she was unstable, unfit to raise her children alone, that the ranch was failing under her management, that she needed a man's guidance. Most of the town believed him. Silas was charming when he wanted to be, and Clara was just a widow who didn't know her place. The wind howled, and Clara pulled her children closer. Please, she prayed to whoever might be listening. Please, let us survive this night. 2 miles away, Elijah Holloway was beginning to think he'd made a serious mistake. The blizzard had come on faster than expected, catching him halfway between Pine Ridge and the Tanner Ranch, where he'd been promised work. Now his horse Whiskey was struggling through snow that reached her belly, and Eli could barely see his own hand in front of his face. He'd been drifting for 5 years now, ever since Sarah died. 5 years of moving from town to town, ranch to ranch, never staying long enough to care about anything or anyone. It was easier that way. Safer. But safe didn't mean smart, and riding into a Wyoming blizzard was about the stupidest thing he'd done since leaving Texas. Easy girl, he murmured to Whiskey, patting her neck. We'll find shelter soon. The horse snorted, unimpressed by his optimism. Eli squinted through the snow, trying to spot any landmark that might guide him. He'd heard there were some abandoned homesteads in this area. If he could find one, they might survive the night. A dark shape emerged from the white. Eli's hand went to his rifle instinctively, but as he got closer, he saw it was just a cabin. Run down, barely standing, but shelter. He dismounted stiffly, leading Whiskey toward the structure. There was a small lean-to on the side that might serve as a makeshift stable better than nothing. As he approached the cabin door, he noticed footprints in the snow. Fresh ones, partially filled by the falling snow but still visible. Small prints, like a woman's, and children's. Eli's hand moved back to his rifle. Fresh tracks in a blizzard meant someone was inside, and in his experience, desperate people did desperate things. He pushed the door open carefully. 4 figures, huddled in the darkness, pressed together beneath a ragged blanket. A woman looked up at him, her eyes wide with terror and something else. Defiance. She shifted her body, putting herself between him and the 3 small shapes behind her. Stay back, she said. Her voice was hoarse but steady. I'm warning you. Eli held up his hand slowly. Ma'am, I don't mean no harm, just looking for shelter from the storm. You're one of Silas's men. I don't know anyone named Silas. I'm just a cowboy passing through. The woman studied him, her eyes searching his face for deception. She was shaking from cold or fear, he couldn't tell. Probably both. Her dress was torn and thin, completely wrong for this weather, and he couldn't see any shoes on her feet. Mama. A small voice came from behind her. A little girl, maybe 7, peeked around her mother's arm. Is he a bad man? Hush, Lily. Eli crouched down slowly, making himself smaller, less threatening. I ain't a bad man, he said gently, addressing the child. My name's Eli. What's yours? The little girl started to answer, but her mother pulled her back. Don't talk to him. Ma'am. Eli kept his voice calm. You and your children are half frozen. I've got a horse outside and supplies in my saddlebags. Blankets, food means to make a fire. Now you can keep pointing that suspicion at me all night, or you can let me help you before those little ones freeze to death. The woman's jaw tightened. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then the smallest child, a boy couldn't be more than 5, started coughing. A deep, rattling cough that spoke of cold settling into small lungs. The woman's resolve cracked. Fine, she said, but you try anything. I won't. Eli stood and moved toward the door. Let me get my supplies and see to my horse. Then we'll get a fire going. He worked quickly, bringing in blankets, jerky, a small pot for melting snow into water. His hands were stiff with cold, but he managed to coax a fire from the old kindling and some dry wood he'd carried in his saddlebags. As the flames grew, he got his first real look at the woman and children. The mother was young, early 30s maybe, with brown hair that had come loose from its pins and eyes the color of storm clouds. Pretty in a tired, worn-down way. The oldest child was a girl on the edge of womanhood, maybe 11, with her mother's coloring, and a protective stance that spoke of responsibility beyond her years. The middle child was the one who'd spoken blonde curls, big frightened eyes. And the boy was the smallest, brown-haired, and currently burrowed against his mother's side, still coughing. All of them were in nightclothes. All of them were barefoot. "What happened?" Eli asked quietly, handing the woman a blanket. She wrapped it around her children before taking one for herself. "None of your business." "Fair enough." He didn't push. "That boy needs something warm in his belly. I've got some broth fixings, won't be fancy, but it'll help." The woman hesitated, then nodded. As Eli set about preparing the simple meal, the oldest girl spoke up. "Are you really just a cowboy?" "Emma," her mother warned. "It's a fair question." Eli glanced at the girl. "Yes, ma'am, just a cowboy. Been drifting a few years now, taking work where I find it." "Where are you from?" "Texas originally. Been a lot of places since." "Why?" "Emma." The mother's voice was sharper now. "It's all right," Eli said. He considered the question. "Guess I was running from something. Took me a while to figure out you can't outrun grief, it just follows you wherever you go." The woman's eyes flickered with something recognition maybe. Understanding. "I'm sorry," Emma said quietly, "for your grief." "Thank you, Miss Emma." Eli handed her a cup of warm broth. "That's kind of you to say." The little girl, Lily, had crept closer to the fire, her shivers finally subsiding. "Mr. Eli, your horse is real pretty." Eli smiled. "That's Whiskey. She's got a sweet temperament, likes apples and sugar cubes. Maybe when the storm clears, you can meet her proper." Lily's face lit up, the first smile Eli had seen from any of them. "Don't—" The mother stopped herself, swallowing whatever warning she'd been about to give. "Just be careful." "Yes, ma'am." Eli turned back to the fire, giving the family space. The boy's coughing had eased after the broth, and he was now asleep against his mother's chest. Lily had followed soon after, curled up between her siblings. Only Emma and the woman remained awake, watching Eli with varying degrees of wariness. "You should sleep too," Eli told them. "I'll keep the fire going and watch for trouble." "I don't sleep around strangers," the woman said flatly. "Then we'll both stay awake." Eli settled against the wall, his rifle across his knees. Wouldn't be the first time. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the howl of the wind outside. Finally the woman spoke. "Clara, my name is Clara Whitmore." Eli nodded. "Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Whitmore, though I wish it were under better circumstances. It's Miss Whitmore now. My husband passed 2 years ago. I'm sorry for your loss." Clara's eyes went to her sleeping children. "He was a good man, a good father." Her voice caught. "He didn't deserve what happened to him." Eli waited, sensing there was more. "Winter storm like this one. He was bringing supplies back from town when the blizzard hit. Horse threw him." Clara's hands tightened on the blanket. "They found him the next morning, frozen half a mile from home. If the storm had held off just 1 more hour—" "The ifs'll eat you alive," Eli said quietly. "I know." Clara looked at him, then really looked. "Your grief, was it a wife?" "Fiancée, Sarah." The name still hurt to say. "Scarlet fever took her. I was working a cattle drive 200 miles away. By the time word reached me, she'd been in the ground a week." "You couldn't have known." "No, but I should have been there." Eli stared into the fire. "Should have married her sooner, worked closer to home, something. Anything. But you didn't." "No, ma'am, I didn't." He met her eyes. "And I've spent 5 years running from that truth." Clara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer. My brother wants to sell me, like cattle, like property. He made a deal with a man named Cornelius Briggs, my ranch, for my hand in marriage. And my children. Her voice broke. They were going to send my children to a workhouse. Eli's grip tightened on his rifle. Your own brother? He wasn't always like this. After William died, something changed in him. He saw the ranch, saw me struggling, and decided I was better off under a man's control. Bitterness crept into her voice. He spent months convincing the town I'm unfit, unstable, that I need to be saved from myself. And this Briggs fellow, wealthy rancher from the next county, 58 years old already, buried 2 wives. Clara's jaw tightened. He looks at me like I'm a broodmare he's considering purchasing. Eli's expression darkened. How many men does your brother have? 3 that I know of. Virgil Colt, and a new one I don't recognize. Clara hesitated. Why are you asking? Because come morning, someone's gonna have to answer for what they tried to do to you and your children. Eli's voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. And I've got nothing better to do than help deliver that reckoning. Clara stared at him. You don't even know me. I know you ran into a blizzard in your night clothes to protect your children. I know you'd rather freeze to death than let them be taken. Eli met her gaze steadily. That tells me everything I need to know about your character, Miss Whitmore. Clara? She said softly. If you're going to help me, you might as well call me Clara. Clara, then. Eli nodded. Try to rest. I'll wake you if there's trouble. She didn't argue this time. Exhaustion was winning over wariness. Clara pulled her children closer and closed her eyes, her body finally surrendering to sleep. Eli watched her for a moment, the way her arms stayed wrapped around her children, even in sleep, the protective curl of her body. Then he turned his attention to the door, his rifle ready, his ears straining for any sound beyond the storm. He didn't know what the morning would bring. Didn't know if this Silas character would come looking, or if they'd be able to make it to town, or if anyone there would even help. But for the first time in 5 years, Eli felt something other than grief settling in his chest. Purpose. These people needed help, and he was going to give it to them, come hell or high water. Outside, the blizzard raged on, but inside the crumbling cabin, a fire burned steadily, and 4 lost souls slept under the protection of a stranger who had nothing left to lose, and maybe something new to find. Dawn came, slowly, gray light filtering through the gaps in the cabin walls. Eli hadn't slept. He'd spent the night feeding the fire, watching the door, and thinking. The storm had died down sometime around 4 in the morning, leaving behind a world buried in white. Clara stirred first, her eyes flying open with the alertness of someone who'd learned to sleep light. She relaxed slightly when she saw Eli still sitting by the fire, then tensed again as reality crashed back. The storm's passed, Eli said quietly. We should move soon before your brother starts searching. Clara nodded gently, waking her children. Tommy protested sleepily, but Emma was already up helping Lily wrap the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Where are we going? Emma asked. Town, Clara said. We need to find someone who'll help us. Who? The question was blunt, almost adult. Everyone believes Uncle Silas. Clara's face tightened, but she didn't have an answer. There's a general store, Eli offered. Run by a woman named Mercer, according to the sign I saw riding in. Older lady. Might be more sympathetic to another woman's troubles. Agnes Mercer. Clara's expression shifted, hope fragile, but present. She was kind to me once after William died. Brought food, helped with the children. Her hope faltered. But that was before Silas started his campaign. Only one way to find out if she's still an ally. Clara took a deep breath. All right, let's go. The journey into Pine Ridge was slow. Eli had given his coat to Clara and his spare shirt to Emma, but the children were still dangerously underdressed for the weather. He carried Tommy, who was still coughing while Clara helped Lily through the deep snow. Emma trudged ahead, her young face set with determination. They were about half a mile from town when Eli heard horses. "Get behind me," he ordered, setting Tommy down and pushing the children toward Clara. "Into the trees, now." Clara didn't argue. She grabbed her children and disappeared into the pines, her dark dress vanishing against the shadows. Eli positioned himself in the center of the trail, his rifle held casually but ready. A moment later, 3 riders emerged from the snow-covered landscape. The lead rider was a broad-shouldered man with Clara's coloring that must be Silas. Behind him rode 2 others, rough-looking men with the bearing of hired muscle. Silas pulled up short at the sight of Eli. "Who the hell are you?" "Just a traveler," Eli replied evenly, "heading to Pine Ridge for supplies." Silas's eyes narrowed. "You see a woman out here, brown hair, probably had some children with her." "Can't say I have." Eli kept his face blank. "Friend of yours?" "My sister." Silas's voice dripped false concern. "She's not well. Ran off in the storm last night and we're worried sick about her." "That's so." "It is." Silas's gaze sharpened. "You sure you haven't seen her woman alone with 3 kids in this weather? She'd be hard to miss." Eli shrugged. "Like I said, haven't seen anyone." Silas studied him for a long moment. Something flickered in his eyes, suspicion, calculation. Then he forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, if you do see her, I'd appreciate you letting me know. There's a reward for her safe return." "I'll keep that in mind." Silas nodded curtly and urged his horse forward, his men following. Eli stood perfectly still as they passed, feeling their eyes on his back. He didn't turn around until the sound of hoofbeats had faded completely. "They're gone," he called softly. Clara emerged from the trees, her face pale. "He's heading toward the Tanner place. That's the opposite direction from town." "Then we move fast." Eli took Tommy back into his arms. "Let's go." They made it to Pine Ridge without further incident. The town was small, maybe 30 buildings clustered along a single main street and already stirring with morning activity. People stopped to stare as they passed, their eyes taking in Clara's torn dress, the children's bare feet, Eli's protective stance. Whispers followed them. "That's the Whitmore widow. Look at the state of her." Silas was right, she's lost her mind. Clara kept her chin up, but Eli saw the way her hands trembled. The general store was a solid building near the center of town with Mercer's Mercantile painted in neat letters above the door. Eli pushed it open, ushering Clara and the children inside. A woman behind the counter looked up, silver-streaked black hair, sharp eyes, a face that had seen plenty, and judged accordingly. Her gaze swept over Clara, the children, Eli, and something in her expression shifted. "Clara Whitmore," she said. "You look like death warmed over." "Mrs. Mercer," Clara's voice cracked. "I need help." Agnes Mercer came around the counter, moving with the brisk efficiency of a woman who'd raised children and buried a husband and kept going anyway. She took one look at Lily's blue-tinged lips, Tommy's rattling cough, and Emma's exhausted face, and her jaw set. "Bring them in the back. There's a stove and blankets." She fixed Eli with a penetrating stare. "You. Who are you?" "Elijah Holloway, ma'am. I found them in an abandoned cabin last night." "And you helped them?" "Yes, ma'am." Agnes studied him for a moment, then nodded once. "Good. We need more men like you in this town." She turned back to Clara. "Come on, girl. Let's get those children warm and then you're going to tell me everything." As Clara followed Agnes into the back room, she glanced over her shoulder at Eli. Their eyes met and something passed between them. Gratitude, trust, the beginning of something neither of them could name yet. Then the door closed and Eli was left standing in the store, listening to the whispers of the townspeople outside and wondering what the hell he'd gotten himself into. But as he looked at that closed door, thinking of the woman and children behind it, he realized he didn't regret it. Not one bit. Whatever came next, he'd face it. For them. Agnes Mercer had seen plenty in her 55 years. She'd buried a husband, raised 4 children alone, and built a business in a territory that didn't always welcome strong women. But the sight of Clara Whitmore huddled in her back room, 3 half-frozen children pressed against her, stirred something fierce in her chest. "Drink this." Agnes pressed a cup of hot tea into Clara's trembling hands. "All of it. You too, Emma." The older girl took her cup with a quiet, "Thank you, ma'am," that spoke of good raising despite hard circumstances. The little one, Lily, was already asleep against her mother's shoulder, her color slowly returning to normal. The boy Tommy sat on a blanket by the stove, his cough finally quieting. "Now." Agnes pulled up a chair and sat facing Clara. "Tell me what happened. The truth, not whatever story your brother's been spinning." Clara's eyes welled with tears she'd been holding back for hours. "He sold me Agnes. Like livestock. Made a deal with Cornelius Briggs, my ranch, for my hand. And my children." Her voice broke. "He was going to send them to a workhouse in Cheyenne." Agnes's face hardened. "I knew Silas had changed since William passed, but this... He's been telling everyone I'm unfit. That I can't manage the ranch, that I'm unstable." Clara gripped her cup tighter. "Half the town won't even look at me anymore. Half the town are fools who'd believe anything a man tells them over what their own eyes can see." Agnes leaned forward. "I remember William's funeral, Clara. I remember how you stood there with 3 babies and promised them you'd keep their home safe. I remember you working dawn to dusk to honor that promise." She reached out and covered Clara's hand with her own. "You ain't unstable. You're inconvenient. There's a difference." A sob escaped Clara's throat. "What am I supposed to do? I've got nothing. No money, no clothes, no proof of what Silas tried to do." "You've got witnesses." Agnes nodded toward the front of the store. "That cowboy who brought you in, he saw what state you were in. He can testify." "A stranger's word against my brother's, in a town that already thinks I'm crazy." "One voice at a time, Clara. That's how you fight this." Agnes stood, her jaw set with determination. "First things first. We get you and those children warm and fed. Then we figure out our next move." Out in the store, Eli stood by the window watching the street. The whispers had turned to open stares, townsfolk gathering in small clusters to discuss the morning's excitement. He could guess what they were saying. The Whitmore widow had finally cracked, run off in the night like a madwoman, and now some drifter had dragged her into town looking like a ghost. The door opened, and a man stepped in. Tall, well-dressed, with the bearing of someone used to being obeyed. His eyes swept over Eli with barely concealed contempt. "You the one who brought in the Whitmore woman?" Eli turned slowly, sizing up the newcomer. "That's right. I'm Reverend Samuel Crane. I run the church here." The Reverend's expression was unreadable. "I'd like to speak with Mrs. Whitmore." "She's in the back with her children. They've been through an ordeal." "So I've heard." Crane moved toward the back room. "Silas Whitmore is a respected member of this community. His concern for his sister's well-being is... His concern nearly got 4 people killed last night." Eli's voice was quiet but hard. "Whatever story he's been telling, I'd encourage you to hear hers before making judgments." The Reverend paused, studying Eli with new interest. "You seem very invested in a stranger's troubles, Mr. Holloway." "And I'm invested in the truth. Thought that was your business too, Reverend." Something flickered in Crane's eyes. Respect, maybe, or at least reconsideration. He nodded once and continued toward the back room. Agnes met him at the door, her arms crossed. "Samuel." "Agnes, I'd like to see Clara." "I'm sure you would. Question is, whose side are you on?" The Reverend's expression softened slightly. "I'm on the side of what's right. You know that." Agnes held his gaze for a long moment, then stepped aside. 10 minutes. And if you upset those children, I'll throw you out myself." Clara looked up as Crane entered her body, immediately tensing. She pulled Lily closer, a protective gesture that had become instinct. "Mrs. Whitmore." Crane settled into the chair Agnes had vacated. "I understand you've had a difficult night." "That's one way to put it." "Your brother is very worried about you. He says you've been struggling since William's death, that you've refused his help repeatedly, and that last night you suffered some kind of episode." Clara's laugh was bitter. "Is that what he's calling it? An episode? I'm asking for your version, Mrs. Whitmore. Help me understand what happened." Clara looked at Emma, who nodded encouragingly. Then she took a deep breath and began. She told him everything. The months of pressure from Silas, the rumors he'd spread, the introduction to Cornelius Briggs, whose eyes had crawled over her like she was meat at market, the escalating threats, and finally last night when Silas had come with his men when they'd tried to drag her from her own home, when she'd heard them discussing how the children would be dealt with once she was gone. They were going to sell my ranch, marry me off to a man I despise, and throw my children into a workhouse. Clara's voice shook with fury. "That's not an episode, Reverend. That's survival." Crane was silent for a long moment. His face had gone pale during her account, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "Do you have any proof of these claims?" "I have my word. I have my children who heard everything, and I have a stranger who found us half dead in an abandoned cabin because my own brother chased us into a blizzard." Clara's eyes blazed. "What more proof do you need?" The Reverend stood slowly. "I need to think about this. Pray on it." "Pray fast, Reverend, because Silas will be back, and next time he won't let us get away." Crane left without another word. Clara slumped against the wall, exhaustion washing over her. "Mama." Emma's voice was small. "Is the Reverend going to help us?" "I don't know, baby. I hope so." "What if he doesn't?" Clara pulled her daughter close. "Then we keep fighting. That's what Whitmores do." Out front, Eli watched the Reverend leave. Crane walked slowly, his head bowed clearly, wrestling with something. That was either a good sign or a very bad one. Agnes emerged from the back room, her face grim. She told him everything. Now we wait and see whose word he believes. And if he sides with the brother, then we find another way. Agnes moved behind her counter, straightening items with practiced hands. "You planning to stick around, Mr. Holloway?" Eli considered the question. A day ago he'd been a man with no ties drifting toward his next job. Now he was standing in a small-town store defending a woman he'd just met against accusations he couldn't prove. "Yes, ma'am, I believe I am." Agnes nodded, something like approval in her eyes. "Good. We're gonna need all the help we can get." The morning passed slowly. Agnes found spare clothes for Clara and the children. Nothing fancy but warm and serviceable. Doc Morrison stopped by to check on Tommy's cough, pronouncing it a simple cold that would clear up with rest and warmth. A few townspeople came and went, their curiosity barely concealed, but no one asked direct questions. Around noon, the door banged open. Silas Whitmore strode in like he owned the place, Virgil and Colt flanking him. His eyes swept the store until they landed on Eli, and his expression darkened. "You." Silas's voice was low and dangerous. "You told me you hadn't seen my sister." Eli straightened from where he'd been leaning against the counter. "I lied. You had no right to interfere in family business. Your family business nearly killed 4 people last night. I'd say that makes it everyone's business." Silas took a step forward, his hand moving toward his hip. "Where is she?" "Safe, which is more than she was with you." Agnes stepped between them, her small frame somehow filling the space. "Silas Whitmore, you will not bring violence into my store. Whatever quarrel you have, you'll settle it elsewhere." "This doesn't concern you, Mrs. Mercer." "Everything that happens in this town concerns me, especially when it involves a woman and children being hunted like animals in the dead of winter." Agnes's voice could have frozen fire. "Now you'll leave my establishment or I'll have the sheriff remove you." Sheriff Hayes is an old friend of mine. Sheriff Hayes also owes me 3 months of store credit. I'd wager he'll listen to whoever's more persuasive. Agnes didn't blink. Your choice, Silas. The silence stretched like a bowstring. Eli's hand hovered near his holster, ready to move if Silas made a play. Virgil and Colt shifted uneasily behind their boss, clearly not expecting this level of resistance. Finally, Silas smiled, a cold, calculating expression that didn't reach his eyes. Fine, we'll do this the proper way. He fixed Eli with a look of pure venom. But you stranger, you've made a powerful enemy today. I hope the Whitmore widow is worth what's coming to you. He turned and walked out, his men following. The door slammed behind them. Agnes let out a breath she'd been holding. Well, that could have gone worse. He'll be back, Eli said quietly. I know, but not today, and that buys us time. She glanced toward the back room. Clara needs to know what happened, and we need to start building a case against her brother before he builds one against her. Eli nodded. What do you need me to do? Right now. Keep watch. Silas isn't above sending his men to cause trouble after dark. Agnes moved toward the back room. And Mr. Holloway, thank you for what you did. Most men would have minded their own business. Minding my own business is what got me nowhere for 5 years, Eli replied. Figured it was time to try something different. Agnes smiled slightly, the first real smile he'd seen from her. Then she disappeared into the back room, leaving Eli alone with his thoughts and the weight of his decisions settling around him like a familiar coat. He'd chosen a side. Now he had to live with it. The afternoon brought unexpected allies. First came Ruth Tanner, a weathered rancher's wife in her 60s, who marched into the store with a basket of fresh bread and a look of fierce determination. Heard what happened? She announced, pushing past Eli toward the back room. Brought supplies. Those children need proper feeding. Agnes tried to intercept her. Ruth, maybe we should... Don't maybe me, Agnes Mercer. I've known Clara since she was a bride. I held her hand when William died. And I'll be damned if I let Silas Whitmore destroy that girl because he got too greedy for his own good. Ruth disappeared into the back room, and a moment later, Clara's surprised voice could be heard greeting her. Next came Doc Morrison again, this time with his wife, who carried a bundle of children's clothes. Our grandchildren outgrew these, Mrs. Morrison explained, handing the bundle to Agnes. Thought they might be useful. You're risking Silas's displeasure, Agnes warned. Silas can go hang. Doc Morrison's voice was sharp. I treated William Whitmore after his accident. I saw his wife's face when I told her there was nothing I could do. That woman has more strength in her little finger than Silas has in his whole body, and anyone who believes his lies is a fool. By evening, a small but determined group had gathered in Agnes's back room. Ruth and James Tanner, Doc Morrison and his wife. Reverend Crane, who had returned with a troubled expression that suggested his prayers had yielded uncomfortable answers. And Agnes herself, presiding over the gathering like a general marshaling her troops. Clara sat in the center, her children finally sleeping peacefully on a makeshift bed in the corner. She looked overwhelmed by the unexpected support. I don't understand, she said softly. I thought everyone believed Silas. Many do, Crane admitted. He's been persuasive, and you've been absent, working your ranch, raising your children. You haven't been around to counter his narrative. I was trying to survive. I know, and that's exactly what he counted on. The Reverend leaned forward. But hearing your story, seeing your children speaking with Mr. Holloway about what he witnessed, I believe you, Clara, and I believe we have a moral obligation to help you. The question is, how? James Tanner said. Silas has money influence and the law on his side. Sheriff Hayes won't move against him without solid proof. What about Cornelius Briggs? Eli spoke up from his position by the door. If we can prove he was part of the conspiracy to force Clara into marriage, that might change things. Briggs is from the next county. Agnes said. Different sheriff, different jurisdiction. But the same crime. Eli met Clara's eyes. If what you've told us is true, Briggs was planning to basically purchase a woman against her will. That's not just immoral, it's illegal. Ruth nodded vigorously. The man's had 2 wives already. Both died under mysterious circumstances. If we can dig up evidence of his past behavior, that's a big if, Crane interrupted. And in the meantime, Clara and her children are vulnerable. Silas knows where they are. He could come back at any moment with more men or worse with Sheriff Hayes and a fabricated reason to take them into custody. Then we don't let that happen. Eli's voice was calm but firm. She stays here protected. We take turns keeping watch, and we start building our case against Silas. You're putting yourself in considerable danger, Mr. Holloway, Crane observed. You have no stake in this fight. I have the stake I choose to have. Eli glanced at Clara, then away. Every person's got to decide what they're willing to stand for. I've spent too long running from that decision. Not anymore. Clara's eyes met his, and something passed between them. Gratitude, respect, and something else neither of them was ready to name. Then it's settled, Agnes declared. Clara and the children stay with me. We rotate watch duties, and tomorrow we start gathering evidence. She fixed each person in the room with a stern look. Whatever happens, we stick together. Silas Whitmore may have power, but we have something stronger. We have the truth. The meeting broke up as night fell. The Tanners headed home, promising to return at dawn. Doc Morrison and his wife departed with assurances of continued support. Reverend Crane lingered, speaking quietly with Clara about faith and perseverance before finally taking his leave. Eli took the first watch, settling into a chair by the front window with his rifle across his knees. The street outside was quiet, but he knew better than to let his guard down. Around midnight, he heard soft footsteps behind him. You should be sleeping. He didn't turn around. Clara settled into the chair beside him. Can't sleep. Too much running through my mind. Your children? Fine. Emma's watching over them. Clara pulled a shawl tighter around her shoulders. I wanted to thank you for everything you've done. You've thanked me enough. No, I haven't. You could have ridden away that night, could have left us in that cabin and never looked back. Instead, you're sitting in a stranger's store waiting for my brother to come and cause trouble. She shook her head. I don't understand why. Eli was quiet for a long moment. 5 years ago, I wasn't there when someone I loved needed me. I've been running from that guilt ever since. He finally looked at her. Maybe I'm trying to make up for it. Or maybe I just couldn't walk away from a woman who'd run barefoot into a blizzard to protect her children. Either way, I'm here now. And I ain't leaving. Clara's eyes glistened in the dim light. You're a good man, Eli Holloway. I'm trying to be. They sat in silence after that, watching the empty street and listening to the wind whisper against the windows. At some point, Clara's head drooped against his shoulder, exhaustion finally claiming her. Eli didn't move, didn't wake her. He just sat there, keeping watch over a woman he barely knew, but was beginning to care about more than he wanted to admit. Somewhere outside, a coyote howled. The sound echoed across the frozen landscape like a warning or a promise. Morning would bring new challenges. Silas wouldn't give up easily, and Cornelius Briggs was still out there waiting. But for now, in this quiet moment before the storm, Eli allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Dawn came cold and clear. The sky painted in shades of pink and gold. Clara woke with a start, disoriented by her surroundings, until memory rushed back. She was still in the chair, but Eli was gone. In his place sat James Tanner, whittling a piece of wood with patient strokes. Morning, Mrs. Whitmore. Your cowboy went to check on his horse. Said to tell you he'd be back within the hour. Your cowboy. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks at the implication. He's not my... Course not. James's eyes twinkled. My mistake. Agnes emerged from the back with coffee and news. Reverend Crane stopped by early. He's going to speak to the congregation today, tell them what he's learned. It won't convince everyone, but it might start turning the tide. Silas will be furious, Clara said. Silas is already furious. Might as well give him something real to be furious about. Agnes handed her a cup. Drink up. We've got a long day ahead. The children woke soon after, and the small back room filled with the sounds of young voices and the smell of breakfast cooking. Tommy's cough had improved overnight, and Lily seemed almost cheerful as she helped Emma set out plates. Watching them, Clara felt a fierce swell of love and determination. She would not let Silas destroy this. Not her children's spirits, not their chance at a normal life, not the fragile hope that was beginning to grow in her heart. Mama. Emma appeared at her elbow. Mr. Eli is back. He wants to talk to you. Clara found Eli in the front of the store, his expression serious. What is it? Saw some movement on the edge of town. 2 riders watching but not approaching. Could be Silas's men. What do we do? Nothing yet. They're just watching. But it means Silas hasn't given up. Eli met her eyes. You need to be prepared for what comes next. He's not going to let this go quietly. Clara straightened her spine. Neither am I. A ghost of a smile crossed Eli's face. That's what I figured. The morning church service drew more attention than usual. Word had spread through Pine Ridge about the confrontation at Mercer's store, and curiosity brought people out in droves. Clara stayed at Agnes's watching through the window as townsfolk streamed toward the small white church. Ruth Tanner had stayed behind to keep her company. Don't worry, dear. Samuel Crane is a good man. He'll say what needs saying. And if people don't believe him, then we keep fighting. Ruth patted her hand. One person at a time, Clara. That's how battles are won. An hour later, the congregation began to disperse. Some walked home quickly, avoiding eye contact. Others gathered in small groups, talking animatedly. And a handful, but more than Clara had dared hope, made their way toward Agnes's store. The first to arrive was a young woman Clara recognized as the baker's wife. She carried a basket of rolls and a nervous expression. Mrs. Whitmore, I wanted to say I'm sorry for believing what Mr. Silas said about you. The woman's cheeks flushed with shame. I should have known better. William was a good man, and you were always kind to me when I was learning to manage my own household. I let gossip poison my judgment, and that wasn't right. Clara's throat tightened. Thank you for saying that. More people came as the morning wore on. Some brought food or supplies. Others simply offered words of support. Not everyone, of course. Silas still had his loyalists, and many remained on the fence. But the tide was beginning to turn. Eli watched from his post by the window, a quiet satisfaction settling in his chest. Crane did good work, he commented to Agnes. Samuel's always been a man of conviction. He just needed to see the truth for himself. Agnes began organizing the donations that had accumulated on her counter. This is a start, Mr. Holloway, but it's only a start. Silas won't take this lying down. As if summoned by her words, a commotion arose in the street. Eli moved to the door, his hand on his pistol. Sheriff Hayes was striding toward the store, his face set in grim lines. Beside him walked Silas Whitmore, wearing an expression of injured righteousness that made Eli's blood boil. Here we go, he muttered. The door opened, and Hayes stepped inside. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s, with the weary air of someone who preferred his job to be simple and was annoyed when it wasn't. Mrs. Whitmore. His voice was formal, official. Your brother has filed a complaint against you. He claims you stole property from the Whitmore Ranch when you departed, and that you've been spreading slanderous accusations against him. Clara rose from her chair, her children moving instinctively to her sides. That's a lie. Everything I took was my own, and I haven't spread anything. I've only told the truth about what he tried to do to me." "Tried to help you," Silas interjected, his voice dripping with false concern. "Sheriff, you can see for yourself my sister is clearly not well. The strain of widowhood, the burden of raising 3 children alone. It's taken a toll on her mental state. I only want what's best for her and my nieces and nephew." "Liar." Emma's voice cut through the room, sharp and clear. Everyone turned to look at the 11-year-old who was trembling with fury. "You're a liar, Uncle Silas. You held Mama down. You said you'd send us away to a workplace. You said we'd never see her again." "Emma?" Clara reached for her daughter. "No, Mama. He can't keep lying and getting away with it." Emma faced the sheriff, her young face fierce. "I heard everything. Lily and Tommy heard it too. He was going to sell Mama to that old man, Mr. Briggs, like she was a horse or something." Sheriff Hayes's expression shifted, uncertainty creeping in. "Mr. Whitmore, is this true?" "Of course not." Silas's smile had become fixed. "The child is confused, or she's been coached by her mother to say, 'I ain't confused.'" Tommy's small voice piped up. He stepped forward, clutching his sister's hand. "Uncle Silas is mean. He made Mama cry. He said bad things about Papa." Lily didn't speak, but she moved closer to her siblings, her eyes fixed on her uncle with an expression of pure terror that spoke louder than any words. Sheriff Hayes looked at the 3 children, then at Clara, then at Silas. The uncertainty in his face had deepened into something more troubling doubt. "Mr. Whitmore, maybe we should discuss this down at my office." "There's nothing to discuss." Silas's voice had gone cold. "These children have been manipulated by their unstable mother. Sheriff, I insist you take Clara into protective custody before she causes further harm to herself or others." "Now hold on," Hayes began. "No." Eli stepped forward, positioning himself between the sheriff and Clara. "You're not taking anyone anywhere. Not without proper evidence, proper due process, and proper consideration of what 3 children have just told you. This doesn't concern you, stranger." Silas's eyes blazed with hatred. "It concerns anyone with a conscience." Eli didn't flinch. "Sheriff Hayes, you've got a choice to make. You can believe a man who's been spreading rumors about his own sister for months, who chased her into a blizzard with 3 children, who made deals with a man from another county to essentially purchase a woman against her will. Or you can believe a mother who's done nothing but try to protect her family." Hayes looked between them, clearly torn. The easy path the one Silas had counted on was crumbling beneath his feet. I need to think about this," he said finally. "Silas, I can't take Mrs. Whitmore into custody based on these allegations, not with witnesses claiming otherwise." "Witnesses?" Silas's voice rose. "You mean children who don't know any better, and a drifter nobody's ever seen before? That's not evidence, Hayes. That's hearsay." "It's enough to warrant further investigation." Hayes's tone firmed. "I'll be looking into both sides of this story, Mr. Whitmore. I suggest you cooperate." For a long moment, Silas said nothing. His face had gone red with suppressed fury, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. Then, with visible effort, he forced his expression into something approaching calm. "Of course, Sheriff. I want nothing more than the truth to come out." He looked at Clara, and his eyes were cold as winter. "I hope you know what you're doing, sister. The truth has a way of cutting both ways." He turned and walked out. The door slammed behind him. Hayes let out a breath. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm not saying I believe everything you've claimed, but I'm not saying I disbelieve it either. You'll stay in town where I can find you if I have more questions. And Mr. Holloway," he fixed Eli with a stern look, "don't make me regret not running you out of town." "Wouldn't dream of it, Sheriff." Hayes nodded once and left. In the silence that followed, Clara sagged against the counter, her strength finally giving out. Eli caught her elbow, steadying her. "Easy. You're all right." "The children." Clara looked at them, tears streaming down her face. "They were so brave. They shouldn't have had to. They did what needed doing." Eli's voice was gentle, just like their mother. Emma reached for Clara's hand. We weren't going to let Uncle Silas lie about you, Mama. Papa always said the truth matters more than anything. Clara pulled all three of her children into her arms, holding them tight. Your papa was right. And I'm so proud of all of you. Agnes cleared her throat, her own eyes suspiciously bright. Well, I think we've had enough excitement for one day. Who wants lunch? The afternoon passed quietly, but tension hung in the air like storm clouds on the horizon. Silas had been defeated for now, but everyone knew it was only temporary. A man like him didn't accept defeat gracefully. He plotted, planned, and struck when you least expected it. Eli spent the hours checking and rechecking their defenses. Agnes's store was sturdy, but it wasn't a fortress. If Silas came with enough men, there wasn't much they could do to stop him. You're thinking loud enough to hear across the room. He turned to find Clara watching him, her arms crossed over her chest. Just being careful. You've been being careful all day. Maybe it's time to tell me what's really on your mind. Eli hesitated. He wasn't used to sharing his thoughts, his worries. 5 years of solitude had made him self-contained, self-reliant. But Clara was watching him with those storm-gray eyes, and something about her made him want to be honest. I'm thinking about what happens when Silas comes back. Because he will come back, Clara. Men like him don't stop until they get what they want, or someone stops them permanently. And you're worried you won't be able to stop him. I'm worried about a lot of things. Eli moved closer to her. I'm worried about those children in there who've already been through more than any kid should have to endure. I'm worried about what happens to you if Silas gets his way. And I'm worried about... He stopped, shook his head. About what? About how much I've come to care about all of this in such a short time. Eli met her eyes. I've been numb for 5 years, Clara, walking through life like a ghost. Then I heard you scream in that blizzard, and something woke up inside me. Something I thought was dead. Clara's breath caught. Eli, I know it's not the time for this conversation. I know we've got bigger problems. But if something happens, if Silas manages to... He swallowed hard. I needed you to know. Whatever comes next, you're not alone anymore. And neither am I. Clara reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his stubbled cheek. You're a good man, Eli Holloway. Whatever you think you've done or failed to do, you're a good man. And I'm grateful, so grateful, that you heard me that night. They stood there for a long moment, closer than they'd ever been, the air between them charged with unspoken possibility. Then from the back room came the sound of Tommy calling for his mother, and the moment broke. Clara smiled a real smile that transformed her tired face. Duty calls. Always does. She started to turn away, then paused. Eli, whatever happens next, we face it together, all of us. Together, he agreed. She disappeared into the back room, and Eli returned to his post by the window. But something had shifted inside him, something that felt like the first crack of dawn after a long, dark night. Whatever was coming, they'd face it. Together. 3 days passed without incident, and that worried Eli more than any direct attack would have. Silas was planning something. A man didn't suffer public humiliation like he had in Agnes's store and simply walk away. He was regrouping, scheming, waiting for the right moment to strike. Eli voiced his concerns to James Tanner over coffee on the morning of the 4th day. He's too quiet, Eli said, staring out at the snow-covered street. Man like that should be making noise threatening posturing. Instead, nothing. James nodded slowly. Could be he's given up. You believe that? Not for a second. The older rancher set down his cup. Silas Whitmore's been planning and scheming since he was old enough to walk. He wanted that ranch from the day William married Clara. Only thing that stopped him was William himself. James paused. Now William's gone, and Silas sees his chance slipping away. That makes him dangerous as a cornered rattlesnake. Any word on Cornelius Briggs? Ruth's been asking around. He's still in the next county, but apparently he's been making inquiries about Clara. Legal inquiries. James's expression darkened. Seems he's looking into whether there's any way to force the marriage through even without Silas's cooperation. Eli's jaw tightened. What kind of legal grounds could he possibly have? None that would hold up in an honest court. But courts ain't always honest, and judges can be bought. James stood reaching for his hat. I'm heading out to check on some things. You keep your eyes open, Holloway. Whatever Silas is planning, it's gonna happen soon. After James left, Eli found Clara in the back room, teaching Emma how to mend a torn dress, while Lily and Tommy played quietly nearby. The domestic scene struck him with unexpected force, a glimpse of the life he'd thought he'd lost forever when Sarah died. Clara looked up as he entered, her face warming with a smile that made his chest ache. Everything all right? Just thinking. He settled into a chair, watching Tommy push a carved wooden horse across the floor. Where'd he get that? Mr. Tanner made it for him yesterday. Tommy hasn't let it go since. Clara's voice softened. It's the first toy he's had since we left home. He lost his favorite bear in the snow that night. We'll get him another bear. Will we? Clara's needle paused. Sometimes I wonder if we'll ever have normal things again. Toys and birthday cakes and Sunday dinners. She shook her head. I'm sorry. I shouldn't complain. We're alive. We're together. That's what matters. Eli leaned forward. You're allowed to want more than just survival, Clara. You're allowed to want a life. A life. She tested the word like it was foreign. I'm not sure I remember what that looks like anymore. Then maybe it's time to figure it out. He hesitated, then continued. When this is over, when Silas is dealt with, and your ranch is secure, what do you want? Clara was quiet for a long moment. Emma had stopped sewing, watching her mother with curious eyes. I want to wake up without fear, Clara said finally. I want my children to have a father figure who treats them with kindness. I want to sit on my porch and watch the sunset without wondering who's coming down the road. She met Eli's gaze. I want to stop being alone. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning, neither was quite ready to acknowledge fully. Mama. Lily tugged at Clara's sleeve. Is Mr. Eli going to stay with us forever? Clara's cheeks flushed. Lily, that's not... I'd like to. Eli's voice was quiet but steady. If your mama will have me. Emma's eyes went wide. Tommy looked up from his wooden horse, confused but interested. Lily bounced on her toes, a grin spreading across her face. Clara stared at Eli, her expression unreadable. You can't just... We barely know each other. It's been less than a week. I know. Eli didn't look away. But I also know that I've felt more alive in these few days than I have in 5 years. I know that when I look at you and these children, I see something worth fighting for, worth staying for. He took a breath. I'm not asking for anything right now, Clara. I'm just telling you where I stand. Whatever happens next, I'm not going anywhere. The silence stretched. Then Clara smiled, and it was like watching dawn break over mountains. We'll see Eli Holloway. We'll see. The moment was interrupted by Agnes's sharp voice from the front of the store. Clara, Eli, get out here, now. They rushed to the front where Agnes stood at the window, her face pale. What is it? Clara demanded. Agnes pointed. Look. Through the frost-touched glass, they could see a group of riders entering town from the east. 5 men led by a figure in a dark coat. Cornelius Briggs had come to Pine Ridge. Eli's hand went to his pistol. Get the children to the back. Don't come out no matter what you hear. Clara grabbed his arm. Eli, you can't face 5 men alone. I won't be alone. He nodded toward the street where James Tanner was already emerging from the livery rifle in hand. Doc Morrison stepped out of his office, shotgun resting casually against his shoulder. Even Reverend Crane appeared on the church steps, his expression grim. The town's watching, Agnes said. Briggs may have come with men, but he's not in his own territory anymore. The rider stopped in front of the store. Briggs dismounted slowly, his movements deliberate, his cold eyes fixed on the building. He was older than Eli had expected, with silver hair and a face that might have been handsome once, but had hardened into something predatory. "Mrs. Whitmore." His voice carried clearly through the morning air. "I believe we have business to discuss." Eli stepped onto the porch, blocking the doorway. "The lady doesn't want to discuss anything with you." Briggs studied him with reptilian calm. "And you are—" "The man who's going to make sure you leave this town the same way you came in, without what you're looking for." Brave words. Briggs smiled, and there was no warmth in it. "I've been told you're the one who interfered with Mr. Whitmore's family arrangements. A drifter with no stake in this matter, inserting himself where he doesn't belong." "I've got all the stake I need." "Do you?" Briggs reached into his coat, and Eli's hand tightened on his pistol. But Briggs only withdrew a folded document. "This is a legal claim to the Whitmore Ranch signed by Silas Whitmore and witnessed by a justice of the peace in Cheyenne. It states that Clara Whitmore, being of unsound mind, has been placed under her brother's guardianship and that all property decisions revert to him." "That's a lie," Clara's voice rang out. She stepped onto the porch beside Eli, ignoring his warning look. "My brother has no legal authority over me or my property." "The courts may disagree, Mrs. Whitmore, especially when multiple witnesses testify to your erratic behavior, your inability to manage your affairs, your abandonment of your home in the middle of winter." Briggs's smile widened. "Public opinion can be quite persuasive in matters of family law." "Public opinion in Pine Ridge doesn't seem to be on your side," Eli observed, nodding toward the armed townspeople who had gathered along the street. Briggs glanced at them dismissively. "These people. They'll lose interest soon enough. They have their own lives to worry about. But I am a patient man, Mrs. Whitmore. I can wait. I can file motions, hire lawyers, drag this through the courts for years." His eyes fixed on Clara. "Or you can accept the inevitable and save yourself the suffering." "The suffering of being your wife." Clara's voice was ice. "I've heard about your previous wives, Mr. Briggs. 2 dead within 5 years of marriage. Accidents, they said. Mysterious illnesses." She stepped closer, and Eli marveled at her courage. "You'll forgive me if I'm not eager to become the third." For the first time, something flickered in Briggs's expression. Surprise, perhaps, that the widow he'd dismissed as weak and compliant had steel in her spine. "Careful, Mrs. Whitmore. Slander is a serious accusation. So is conspiracy to force a woman into marriage against her will." Sheriff Hayes's voice cut through the tension. He approached from the side street, his deputy at his shoulder. "Mr. Briggs, I've been in contact with your county's sheriff. Seems there are some questions about the circumstances of your wives' deaths that were never properly answered." Briggs's composure finally cracked. "This is outrageous. I'm a respected businessman, a landowner. You're a suspect in 2 possible murders." Hayes interrupted. "And until those questions are resolved, I'm going to have to ask you to leave Pine Ridge. This matter with Mrs. Whitmore can wait for the courts, as you said. In the meantime, your presence here is only causing trouble. You can't—" "I can." Hayes's hand rested on his pistol. "This is my town, Mr. Briggs, and I'm asking you to leave. Politely for now." The moment stretched. Briggs's men shifted uneasily, outnumbered and outgunned by the armed townspeople who had gathered. Whatever protection they'd expected to provide was useless against an entire community standing together. Finally, Briggs stepped back. His face had gone rigid with fury, but his voice was controlled when he spoke. "This isn't over, Mrs. Whitmore. Not by a long shot." He swung onto his horse and fixed Eli with a venomous stare. "And you, drifter. You've made a powerful enemy today. I don't forget, and I don't forgive." He wheeled his horse and rode out of town, his men following. They watched until the riders disappeared over the rise, leaving nothing but hoofprints in the snow. Clara let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Her legs trembled, and she gripped the porch railing for support. Easy. Eli's arm came around her steady and warm. You were incredible. I was terrified. That's what makes it incredible. He turned to Sheriff Hayes. Thank you. Hayes nodded curtly. Don't thank me yet. That document Briggs was waving around, I don't know if it's legitimate or not. We need to find out what Silas has been doing behind the scenes. Where is Silas? Clara asked suddenly. He wasn't with Briggs. The question hung in the air like a warning. If Silas hadn't accompanied Briggs to town, where was he? What was he doing while everyone's attention was focused on the confrontation here? The answer came less than an hour later. Tommy came running from the back room, his face streaked with tears. Mama, Emma's gone. Clara's blood turned to ice. What do you mean gone? Where's your sister? Lily appeared behind Tommy, clutching her doll. A man came to the back door. He said he had a message from Uncle Silas. Emma went to talk to him and she didn't come back. Clara was running before Lily finished speaking. The back door stood open, cold air rushing in. In the snow beyond, she could see footprints, 2 sets leading away behind the buildings. Emma! Clara's scream echoed through the alley. Emma! Eli caught up to her, his rifle in hand. Clara, wait. We don't know. He took her. Silas took my daughter. Clara's voice had gone wild with terror and rage. I'll kill him. I swear to God I'll kill him with my own hands. We'll find her. Eli gripped her shoulders, forcing her to focus. But we have to be smart about this. If Silas has Emma, he's using her as leverage. He wants you to come running panicked, making mistakes. I can't just... I know. But listen to me. Eli's voice was urgent. Think like Silas. Where would he take her? Somewhere he feels safe, somewhere he has the advantage. Clara's mind raced through the possibilities. The ranch. Our ranch. It's the only place he knows better than I do. James Tanner appeared at the back door. What's happening? Silas took Emma, Eli said tersely. We're going after her. I'm coming with you. Me too. Doc Morrison pushed forward, his shotgun ready. That man's gone too far this time. Clara looked at them, these people who barely knew her, but were willing to risk their lives for her daughter. Then she looked at Eli, whose jaw was set with determination, and something fiercer, something that looked like love. Agnes. Clara called, keep Tommy and Lily safe. Don't let them out of your sight. Go! Agnes's voice was fierce. Bring that girl home. They rode hard through the snow, 4 of them, against whatever awaited at the Whitmore Ranch. Clara pushed her borrowed horse faster than was safe, but nothing could make her slow down. Her daughter was in Silas's hands. Her daughter who had been so brave, who had stood up to her uncle in front of the whole town. This was revenge. Clara understood that now. Silas couldn't hurt Clara directly, so he was striking at her heart. If he harmed one hair on Emma's head, Clara would make sure he never hurt anyone again. The ranch came into view as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. The homestead looked peaceful from a distance, smoke rising from the chimney, cattle moving in the distant pasture. But Clara knew that peace was an illusion. Hold up. Eli raised his hand, bringing them to a stop behind a rise. We need to see what we're dealing with before we go charging in. My daughter is in there. I know, and we're going to get her back. But if we ride in blind, Silas could panic, could hurt her. Eli's eyes held Clara's. Trust me. Please. Every instinct screamed at her to keep riding, to tear down the door and find her child. But she forced herself to nod. What do you see? Eli studied the ranch through narrowed eyes. 2 men out front, probably Virgil and Colt. Don't see Silas, which means he's inside with Emma. He turned to James. Is there another way in? There's a root cellar entrance on the north side. Clara would know it. I do. Clara's voice steadied as planning took over from panic. William built it as an emergency escape, same as the tunnel at the cabin. It leads up into the kitchen. Can you get in without being seen? Clara nodded. If someone keeps those men occupied out front. Eli looked at James and Doc Morrison. "Think you can do that?" James grinned without humor. "We can do more than occupy them. Give us 10 minutes, then make your move. Be careful, both of you." "Same to you." James touched his hat brim and rode off, Morrison following. When they were gone, Eli turned to Clara. "You ready?" "I've been ready since the moment I heard he was gone." Clara's hands trembled, but her voice was steady. "Let's get my daughter back." They circled wide, staying out of sight until they reached the north side of the property. The root cellar doors were half buried in snow, but Clara found them easily, muscle memory guiding her hands even as fear threatened to overwhelm her. "Wait here," she whispered to Eli. "Give me a minute to get inside, then follow." "Clara, he's my brother. This is my fight." She touched his face briefly. "But I'm glad you're here." Before he could respond, she lifted the door and disappeared into the darkness below. The cellar smelled of earth and potatoes and childhood memories. Clara moved through it by feel her heart pounding so loud she was sure Silas could hear it. The stairs leading up to the kitchen were right where she remembered rough-hewn wood under her fingers. She pressed her ear to the door at the top. Voices drifted through, muffled but recognizable. "Your mother will come." Silas's voice calm and confident. "She'll come for you, and then we'll settle this family business once and for all. She'll bring help." Emma, scared but defiant. "The whole town is on her side now." "The town," Silas laughed. "The town is a collection of shopkeepers and farmers who'll forget about this by spring. None of them have the stomach for a real fight. Mr. Eli does." Silence. Then Silas spoke again, his voice lower, harder. "Eli Holloway, a drifter who wandered in at the wrong moment. He'll be dealt with just like anyone else who interferes with family matters. He's not afraid of you." The sound of a slap made Clara's blood boil. Emma cried out, and Clara had to grip the stair railing to keep from bursting through the door. "Not yet. Wait for the distraction." "You'll learn respect," Silas was saying. "Just like your mother should have learned it years ago." William made her soft, made her think she was equal to a man. But she's not. None of you are. Papa was twice the man you'll ever be. Another slap. Clara bit her lip until she tasted blood. Then from outside came the sound of gunshots. Clara didn't hesitate. She threw open the door and launched herself into the kitchen, catching Silas off guard. He stood with his back to her, his hand raised to strike Emma again. The girl was tied to a chair, her cheek red and swollen, but her eyes blazed with fury. "Get away from my daughter!" Silas spun, his expression shifting from surprise to something darker. "Clara, I knew you'd come." "Let her go. This is between us." "It was always between us." Silas moved away from Emma, his hand drifting toward the pistol at his hip. "You and your stubborn pride. You and your refusal to accept your place. William filled your head with nonsense about equality, partnership, respect. But he's dead now, and it's time you understood reality." Clara stood her ground. "My reality is that I'd rather die than let you control me or my children." "That can be arranged." He drew his pistol, but Clara was faster than he expected. She grabbed a heavy iron skillet from the counter and swung it at his arm, knocking the gun aside. It discharged into the floor, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Silas roared with pain and rage, lunging at her. They grappled, crashing into furniture, years of resentment and hatred fueling their struggle. Clara was smaller, weaker, but she fought with the ferocity of a mother protecting her child. "Mama!" Emma screamed, struggling against her bonds. Clara's fingers found Silas's face, clawing at his eyes. He howled and threw her back, sending her crashing into the table. Stars exploded in her vision. Silas retrieved his pistol, aiming it at Clara with a shaking hand. "You should have submitted," he snarled. "You should have been grateful for what I offered. Instead, you chose this." Clara looked up at her brother, this stranger wearing a familiar face, and felt something shift inside her. Not fear, not anymore. "I chose freedom," she said quietly. I chose my children. I chose myself. Then you chose death. His finger tightened on the trigger. The back door exploded inward, and Eli came through like an avenging angel. His first shot took Silas in the shoulder, spinning him around. The second knocked the pistol from his hand. Silas collapsed against the wall, clutching his wounds, his face contorted with pain and disbelief. "It's over," Eli said, his voice cold as the winter outside. "Don't make me fire again." Clara scrambled to Emma, her trembling fingers working at the ropes. "Baby, are you hurt? Did he—" "I'm okay, Mama." Emma's voice broke as the ropes fell away. "I'm okay." They clung to each other, mother and daughter, as the violence drained from the room and left only the aftermath. Eli kept his rifle trained on Silas, while footsteps thundered on the porch. James Tanner appeared in the doorway, followed by Doc Morrison. "Virgil and Colt are secured. Sheriff's on his way." He took in the scene with grim satisfaction. "Looks like you didn't need much help after all." "I had help." Clara looked at Eli, her eyes shining with tears and something deeper. "I had exactly the help I needed." Silas groaned from his position on the floor. "This isn't justice. I'm her brother. I was trying to help her." "Help?" Clara stood, her daughter still pressed against her side. "You tried to sell me like cattle. You threatened to send my children to a workhouse. You kidnapped my daughter and struck her." She looked down at him with something that wasn't quite hatred, but was close. "You're not my brother anymore. You're just a man who's going to answer for his crimes." Sheriff Hayes arrived as the last light faded from the sky. Silas was taken into custody, along with Virgil and Colt, who had surrendered without much fight once they realized they were outnumbered. The charges were numerous: kidnapping, assault, conspiracy, attempted forced marriage. "He'll go to prison," Hayes told Clara as his deputies loaded the prisoners onto horses. "For a long time." "Good." Clara watched her brother being led away. There was no satisfaction in his defeat, only exhaustion and a hollow ache where family loyalty used to live. "What about Briggs?" "That's being handled by the authorities in his county. With Silas's testimony and the questions about his wives, I doubt Cornelius Briggs will be troubling anyone for a long while." After Hayes left, Clara stood on the porch of her home, the home she'd been driven from just days ago. Emma was inside with James and Doc Morrison being fussed over and fed. Eli stood beside Clara, his shoulder touching hers. "How are you?" he asked quietly. "I don't know." She stared out at the land she and William had worked together, the land she'd almost lost. "I feel like I should feel something more, relief or triumph or closure. But all I feel is tired." "That's shock. It'll pass." Eli hesitated, then put his arm around her. She leaned into him without resistance. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. I told you I'm not going anywhere." Clara looked up at him, this man who had appeared out of a blizzard and changed her life. "I'm going to hold you to that, Eli Holloway. I'm counting on it." They stood together in the gathering dark, the worst finally behind them, the future stretching out unknown, but no longer frightening. Whatever came next, they would face it together, all of them. A family forged not by blood, but by choice. The days that followed Silas's arrest moved slowly like honey in winter. Clara found herself waking each morning with a strange sense of disorientation, her mind expecting danger that no longer existed. Old habits died hard, and she would lie still for long minutes, listening for footsteps that weren't coming, bracing for threats that had been locked away in Sheriff Hayes's jail. It was Emma who pulled her back to the present, each time the girl appearing in her doorway with Tommy on her hip and Lily trailing behind. "Breakfast, Mama. Mr. Eli already started the coffee." Mr. Eli. The children had taken to calling him that, a title of respect that sat somewhere between stranger and family. Clara wasn't sure when he had become a permanent fixture in their household, only that it felt right, felt natural, felt like something that had been missing was finally falling into place. She found him in the kitchen that morning, his sleeves rolled up as he flipped pancakes with surprising skill. Tommy was perched on a stool beside him, watching with the rapt attention only a 5-year-old could muster. "Mr. Eli says he learned to cook on cattle drives," Tommy reported importantly. "He says cowboys eat beans and biscuits mostly, but sometimes there's pie." "Is that so?" Clara leaned against the doorframe, watching the scene with a warmth spreading through her chest. Eli glanced up, and the smile that crossed his face made her heart stutter. "Morning, coffee's ready. You didn't have to do all this." "Wanted to." He slid a stack of pancakes onto a plate. "Besides, I figured you could use a morning where someone else does the work." Clara poured herself coffee, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. Through the window, she could see the ranch spreading out before her, her land, her home reclaimed and safe. It still felt fragile, like something that might shatter if she held it too tightly. "You're thinking too hard again." She looked up to find Eli watching her, his expression gentle. "How can you tell? You get this little line right here." He touched his own forehead. "Like you're carrying something heavy." "I am carrying something heavy." Clara set down her cup. "Eli, what happens now? The danger's past. Silas is in jail. Briggs is being investigated. You could leave. Find that work you were looking for. Build your own life somewhere." Eli was quiet for a moment, his eyes never leaving her face. Then he crossed the kitchen and took her hands in his. "Clara, when I rode into that blizzard, I was a man with nothing to live for, just drifting day to day, waiting for something to give my life meaning again." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Then I found you. Found those children. Found something worth staying for. You barely know us." "I know enough." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I know you're the strongest woman I've ever met. I know your children have more courage than most grown men. I know that when I think about leaving, it feels like cutting off my own arm." He met her eyes. "I'm not going anywhere, Clara. Not unless you send me away." Her vision blurred with tears she refused to shed. "I don't want you to go." "Then I won't." "But what does that mean? For us, for the children?" "It means whatever we decide it means." Eli released her hands and stepped back, giving her space. "I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. I'll sleep in the barn if that's what's proper. I'll work your ranch as hired help if that's what you need. But I'm staying, Clara. One way or another, I'm staying." Before she could respond, Lily appeared in the doorway, her blonde curls wild from sleep. "Mama, is Mr. Eli making pancakes? I want the ones shaped like stars." The moment broke, but something had shifted between them. A door had opened, and neither of them was going to close it. The weeks that followed established new rhythms for the Whitmore household. Eli threw himself into the work of the ranch with the dedication of a man who had finally found his purpose. He repaired fences damaged by winter storms, tended to the cattle, and slowly restored the property to the thriving operation it had been when William was alive. The children blossomed under his attention. Tommy followed him everywhere, peppering him with questions about horses and cattle and what it was like to be a real cowboy. Lily's nightmares, which had plagued her since the night they fled into the blizzard, gradually faded as Eli established a bedtime routine of stories and gentle reassurance. But it was Emma who surprised Clara most. Her eldest daughter, who had been so protective, so suspicious of anyone who might threaten their family, had slowly warmed to Eli in a way that went beyond mere tolerance. Clara found them one afternoon in the barn, Emma perched on a hay bale, while Eli taught her to oil a saddle. "You have to work it in slow," Eli was explaining. "Let the leather absorb it. Rush it, and you'll just make a mess." "Like Mama with her bread dough," Emma observed. "She says patience makes the difference between good bread and great bread." "Your Mama's a wise woman." Emma was quiet for a moment, her hand still working the leather. "Mr. Eli, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Are you going to marry Mama?" Clara, who had been approaching the barn, stopped short at the question. She pressed herself against the wall, heart pounding, unable to move. Eli's response came slowly, carefully. "That's something your mama and I would have to decide together, Emma. It's not just about what I want." "But do you want to—" Another pause. Then so quietly Clara barely heard it. "Yes, I do." "Good." Emma's voice held a note of approval that made Clara's eyes sting. "Papa would have liked you. He always said a real man protects his family, but he also respects them. You do both." "That means a lot, Emma. More than you know." "Just don't hurt Mama. She's been hurt enough." "I won't. I swear to you I won't." Clara slipped away before they could discover her, her mind spinning with what she'd heard. Emma's approval mattered more than she'd realized. Her daughter had been the hardest to win over the most skeptical, the most protective. If Emma could accept Eli, maybe Clara could finally allow herself to do the same. That evening, after the children were in bed, Clara found Eli on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. She settled into the chair beside him close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Emma told me what you said in the barn today." Eli went still. "She did. She's protective of me. Wanted to make sure I knew you'd passed her test." "And what test was that?" Clara smiled. "The Emma Whitmore test of character. She's been running it since the day you arrived. Watching how you treat Tommy, how you talk to Lily, how you look at me when you think no one's watching." Eli had the grace to look embarrassed. Was I that obvious? Only to someone who was looking. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the night sounds of the ranch settling around them. "I meant what I said." Eli finally spoke. "About wanting to marry you. But I also meant what I said about not rushing you. You've been through too much to be pushed into anything." Clara reached over and took his hand. "What if I'm tired of waiting?" He turned to look at her, hope and caution warring in his eyes. "Clara, William's been gone 2 years. I've spent those years surviving, barely keeping my head above water. I forgot what it felt like to want something for myself." She squeezed his hand. "You reminded me. You and your stubborn refusal to leave your patience with my children, your willingness to fight for people you barely knew. I knew enough. So do I." Clara took a breath, gathering her courage. "Eli Holloway, I'm not a young woman with romantic notions. I'm a widow with 3 children, a struggling ranch, and more baggage than a stagecoach. I can't promise it'll be easy. I don't want easy. I want you." The words hung in the air between them, simple and profound. Clara felt something loosen in her chest, some knot of fear and grief that had been wound tight for years. "Then stay," she whispered. "Not as hired help, not as a guest. Stay as my partner, my husband, if you'll have me." Eli's answer was to pull her into his arms and kiss her with a tenderness that made her forget every hard thing she'd ever endured. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. "Is that a yes?" Clara asked, a hint of teasing in her voice. "That's a yes, a definitely, and an absolutely." Eli laughed, and the sound was pure joy. "Clara Whitmore, you just made me the happiest man in Wyoming territory." News of their engagement spread through Pine Ridge like wildfire. Clara had expected judgment whispers about the impropriety of a widow remarrying so quickly, or to a drifter no one knew. Instead, she found herself embraced by the community that had rallied to her defense. Agnes Mercer was the first to appear at the ranch, a bolt of white fabric tucked under her arm. "For your dress," she announced, setting it on the kitchen table. "Every bride deserves a proper wedding gown." "Agnes, I can't accept this. It's too much." "Nonsense. After what you've been through, you deserve something beautiful." Agnes fixed her with a stern look that softened into something like affection. "Besides, I've been waiting years for someone to use this fabric. It's been sitting in my shop since before my husband passed. He bought it meaning to have me make myself something pretty." She touched the fabric gently. "I think he'd be happy knowing it's going to a woman who fought for her freedom." Ruth Tanner came next with a jar of preserves and a firm hug. "James and I want to host the wedding dinner," she said. "Our place is bigger than yours, and I've been looking for an excuse to cook for a crowd." "You've already done so much for us." "And we'll do more. That's what neighbors are for." Ruth's eyes sparkled. "Besides, I haven't seen a proper wedding in Pine Ridge in 3 years. We could all use something to celebrate." Even Reverend Crane stopped by, his manner warm as he discussed the ceremony. "I'll admit, when I first heard the rumors about you, I was inclined to believe them," he confessed. "Silas was convincing, and you'd been so absent from town events. But seeing how you handled yourself, how you fought for your children, how this community has rallied around you, it's been humbling." He smiled. "It will be my honor to officiate your wedding, Mrs. Whitmore. I can't think of a union more deserving of God's blessing." The children threw themselves into wedding preparations with enthusiasm. Emma appointed herself chief organizer, creating lists of tasks that would have impressed a military commander. Lily made paper flowers to decorate the church, and Tommy declared that he would be the one to give Mama away, a role he practiced by marching solemnly around the house with his wooden horse tucked under his arm. One evening, as Clara watched them planning and laughing, Eli came to stand beside her. "Penny, for your thoughts. I'm thinking about how different this is from my first wedding." Clara leaned against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "William and I got married in my parents' parlor. Small, quiet, just family. I thought that was how it would always be, just the two of us against the world." "Do you regret that it's different now?" "No." Clara turned to face him. "I loved William. I'll always love him. But he's gone, and clinging to the past won't bring him back. What I have now, what we're building together, it's not a replacement for what I lost. It's something new, something precious in its own right." Eli cupped her face in his hands. "I'll never try to replace him, Clara. Not to you, not to the children." "I know. That's one of the reasons I love you." It was the first time either of them had said the words. Eli's eyes widened, and then a smile spread across his face. "Say that again." "I love you, Eli Holloway." "I love you too, Clara Whitmore." He kissed her softly. "Soon to be Clara Holloway, if you don't mind." "I don't mind at all." The wedding was set for Christmas Eve, a date chosen for its symbolism of hope and new beginnings. As the day approached, Pine Ridge transformed. Despite the hard winter, people found ways to contribute, decorating the little church with evergreen boughs and candles, preparing dishes for the celebration that would follow. The morning of the wedding dawned cold and clear, the sky a brilliant blue that seemed to promise blessings. Clara woke early, her nerves jangling despite her certainty about the decision she was making. Agnes arrived at dawn to help her dress along with Ruth and Doc Morrison's wife. They fussed over her hair, adjusted the gown they'd spent weeks creating, and offered the kind of support only women who had weathered their own storms could provide. "You look beautiful," Agnes declared when they were finished. "William would be proud." Clara studied her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at her seemed different from the frightened widow who had fled into a blizzard just weeks ago. There was strength in her eyes now, and hope, and the beginnings of a joy she'd thought she'd never feel again. "I think he would be," Clara agreed softly. Emma appeared in the doorway, dressed in her best dress, her hair carefully braided. "Mama, it's time." At the church, Eli waited at the altar with Reverend Crane, looking more nervous than Clara had ever seen him. His suit was borrowed from James Tanner, and it fit him well enough, but it was his expression that made Clara's heart swell. He looked at her as though she were the answer to every prayer he'd ever whispered. Tommy walked her down the aisle, his small hand clutching hers with fierce determination. Lily and Emma followed as attendants, their faces solemn with the importance of the occasion. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. Reverend Crane spoke of love found in unexpected places, of courage tested and proven, of families forged not just by blood, but by choice. Clara barely heard the words, her attention fixed on Eli's face, on the promise in his eyes. When it came time for their vows, Eli spoke first. "Clara, when I found you in that blizzard, I was a man who'd given up on living. I was just waiting to die one day at a time. You changed that. You and your children gave me a reason to stay, to fight, to believe that there was still good in the world." His voice roughened with emotion. "I promise to protect you, to support you, to stand beside you through whatever storms may come. I promise to love your children as my own. And I promise that as long as I draw breath, you will never face anything alone again." Clara's eyes were streaming as she spoke her own vows. "Eli, I spent 2 years believing that love was something I'd lost forever. That the best parts of my life were behind me, and all that was left was survival. You showed me I was wrong." She gripped his hands tightly. "You rode into the worst night of my life and offered me hope. You stayed when you had every reason to leave. You fought for me and my children when you had nothing to gain." She smiled through her tears. "I promise to be your partner in all things. To stand with you in good times and hard times. To build a life with you that honors both our pasts and embraces our future. I love you, Eli Holloway, today and always." Reverend Crane pronounced them husband and wife, and when Eli kissed her, the congregation burst into applause. Clara could hear Tommy cheering, and Lily's delighted squeal, and Emma's softer, satisfied sigh. The celebration at the Tanner Ranch lasted well into the evening. There was food and music and dancing, the whole community coming together to celebrate not just a wedding, but a victory. The people who had stood against Silas, who had protected Clara and her children, who had refused to let injustice prevail, they were all there laughing and toasting and enjoying the simple pleasure of a happy ending. As the night wore on, Clara found a quiet moment on the Tanner's porch, looking up at the stars. Eli found her there, slipping his arm around her waist. "Mrs. Holloway." She smiled at the name. "Mr. Holloway. How does it feel?" "Like a dream. Like any moment I'm going to wake up and find myself back in that blizzard running for my life." Eli turned her to face him. "That's not a dream. This is reality. You fought for this, Clara. You earned it." "We earned it." "We did." He kissed her forehead. "Are you ready to go home?" Home. The word had never sounded so sweet. They collected the children, who were half asleep from excitement and celebration. Tommy insisted on being carried, his arms wound tight around Eli's neck. Lily walked between Clara and Emma, holding both their hands. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, the children nodding off one by one. By the time they arrived, even Emma was struggling to keep her eyes open. Eli carried Tommy to bed while Clara settled the girls. When the children were tucked in their faces, peaceful in sleep, she found Eli waiting for her in the kitchen. "This is really happening," Clara said softly. "We're really a family." Eli took her hand. "We've been a family since the moment those children decided to trust me. The ceremony just made it official." Clara looked around the kitchen at the home that had been the site of so much pain and fear, now filled with hope and love. The ghosts of the past were still there. William's memory, Silas's betrayal, the terror of that desperate flight through the snow. But they no longer ruled her. "I'm happy." She realized the words feeling strange and wonderful on her tongue. "I didn't think I'd ever be happy again." "Neither did I." Eli pulled her close. "But here we are." Outside, snow began to fall soft and gentle, blanketing the ranch in fresh white. Clara watched it through the window, thinking of another snowy night that had ended so differently. "Eli, do you believe in fate?" "I believe that sometimes when we're at our lowest, something happens to remind us that the story isn't over yet." He rested his chin on top of her head. "I don't know if that's fate or providence or just dumb luck, but I'm grateful for it." "So am I." They stood together in the warmth of their home, their children safe upstairs, their future stretching out before them like the endless Wyoming sky. The storm was over. The healing had begun. And for the first time in years, Clara Holloway went to sleep without fear. Spring came to Wyoming territory like a whispered promise, melting the snow that had witnessed so much pain and transforming the land into something new. Clara Holloway stood at her kitchen window, watching the first green shoots pushing through the thawing earth, and marveled at how different her life had become. 3 months had passed since the wedding. 3 months of learning to be a wife again, of watching Eli become a father to children who weren't his by blood, but were absolutely his by choice. 3 months of healing. "Mama!" Tommy's voice rang out from the yard. "Mama, come look. The baby cow is standing up." Clara dried her hands on her apron and stepped onto the porch. Tommy was bouncing with excitement near the barn where Eli knelt beside a newborn calf that had arrived during the night. The little creature wobbled on unsteady legs, while its mother looked on with bovine patience. "She's a beauty, isn't she?" Eli called, grinning up at Clara. "First calf of the season. Good sign for the year ahead." Tommy reached out a tentative hand to pet the calf's damp fur. "Can I name her Papa Eli?" The name had evolved over the weeks from Mr. Eli to Papa Eli, a title the children had adopted naturally as their bond with him deepened. The first time Tommy had used it, Eli had excused himself and walked out to the barn where Clara had found him later, with red-rimmed eyes and a shaky smile. "Sure can, partner. What are you thinking?" Tommy considered the question with the gravity only a 5-year-old could muster. "Snowdrop, because she came when the snow was dropping away." "Snowdrop it is." Clara watched them together, her heart so full it almost hurt. This was what she'd dreamed of during those dark months after William's death, what she'd feared she would never have again: a partner, a father for her children, a future worth believing in. Emma appeared beside her, a book tucked under her arm. At 11 going on 40, her eldest daughter had finally relaxed into something approaching normal childhood since Eli's arrival. She still kept a watchful eye on the family, still stepped up when needed, but the desperate tension that had marked her since William's death had eased. "Lily's finishing her letters," Emma reported. "She got through the whole alphabet without crying today." "That's wonderful." Lily's struggles with reading had been a constant worry, but Ruth Tanner had been working with her twice a week, patient and encouraging, and the little girl was finally making progress. "Mama." Emma's voice was hesitant. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Are you happy? Really happy, I mean. Not just pretending for us." Clara pulled her daughter close, breathing in the scent of soap and sunshine. "I'm really happy, baby. Happier than I've been in a long time." "Because of Papa Eli." "Because of a lot of things. Papa Eli, yes, but also you and your brother and sister. This ranch. The people who helped us when we needed it most." Clara kissed the top of Emma's head. "Happiness isn't just one thing, Emma. It's made up of lots of little pieces that fit together." Emma nodded slowly, processing this. "I think I'm happy too. I wasn't sure for a while, but now I think I am." "I'm glad, sweetheart. You deserve to be happy." They stood together, watching Eli and Tommy with the calf, until Lily came bursting out the door, waving a piece of paper. "I did it. I wrote my whole name without any help. Look, Mama, look." The paper was clutched in small fingers, the letters wobbly but legible. "Lily Whitmore," it read with a little flower drawn beside it. "That's beautiful, baby." Clara knelt to examine the achievement properly. "I'm so proud of you." "Can I show Papa Eli?" "Go ahead." Lily raced across the yard, her blonde curls bouncing, and Clara watched Eli scoop her up, examining her paper with the same seriousness he'd give to a legal document. His praise made Lily beam, and when he suggested they hang it on the kitchen wall, the little girl practically glowed. This, Clara thought. This is what I fought for. This is what almost got taken away. The memory of Silas still lurked in the corners of her mind, a shadow that would probably never fully disappear. He was in prison now, awaiting trial on multiple charges. Sheriff Hayes had informed them that Cornelius Briggs had also been arrested in connection with his wives' deaths. Justice, slow but certain, was grinding forward. But Silas himself had sent a letter. It had arrived 2 weeks ago, addressed to Clara in handwriting she would recognize anywhere. She hadn't read it at first, had considered burning it unopened. But something made her keep it, and eventually, with Eli beside her, she had broken the seal. The letter was rambling in places, defensive in others, but threaded through. It was something that might have been genuine remorse. Silas wrote of their childhood, of the parents they had lost, of how fear and greed had twisted him into someone he didn't recognize. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't try to justify what he'd done. He simply said he was sorry, and that he hoped one day Clara might find peace, even if he never did. She hadn't written back. Maybe she never would. But the letter sat in a drawer in her bedroom, a reminder that even the people who hurt us most are still human, still capable of regret, still carrying their own wounds. Eli had asked her once if she thought she could ever forgive Silas. "I don't know," she'd answered honestly. "But I'm trying to let go of the hate. It's heavy carrying that much anger, and I've got better things to hold on to now." The days lengthened as spring progressed, bringing with them the endless work of a ranch coming back to life. Eli threw himself into the labor with an energy that amazed Clara, repairing winter damage, expanding the garden, helping their few ranch hands with the cattle. He worked from dawn to dusk most days, but he always made time for the children. Every evening without fail, he read to them before bed. Stories of adventure and courage, of heroes who protected the weak and villains who got their just deserts. Tommy hung on every word. Lily snuggled against him, her old fears gradually fading. And Emma, who had declared herself too old for bedtime stories, somehow always found a reason to be in the room listening from her chair in the corner. One evening, Clara paused in the doorway to listen. Eli was telling them about a Texas Ranger who had saved a family from outlaws, a story she suspected was at least partly autobiographical. "And then what happened?" Tommy demanded. "Well, the ranger rode off into the sunset figuring his job was done, but the little boy from the family ran after him shouting for him to stop. Why? Because the boy had something important to tell him. He said, 'Mister, you saved us, but now you're leaving. Don't you know that makes you family now?' What did the ranger do?" Eli's voice softened. He thought about it for a long time. He'd been alone for years, didn't know how to be part of a family anymore. But that little boy was looking up at him with such hope, and the ranger realized something. "What?" "That being part of a family isn't something you know how to do. It's something you learn, day by day together." Eli glanced up and caught Clara watching. A smile crossed his face. So the ranger turned his horse around, went back to that family, and never left again. "That's a good ending," Lily said sleepily. "I think so too, sweetheart. I think so too." Later, after the children were asleep, Clara found Eli on the porch, a habit they'd developed over the months. The night air was warmer now, carrying the promise of summer. "That story," she said, settling beside him, "about the ranger." "What about it? Was it about you?" Eli was quiet for a moment. "Parts of it. Changed some details, left out others. But the ending..." He looked at her. "The ending is definitely true." Clara reached for his hand. "I'm glad you turned your horse around." "So am I." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear one by one. In the distance, a coyote howled, and somewhere in the barn, Whiskey snorted in response. "Clara, there's something I need to tell you." She turned to look at him, caught by the serious note in his voice. "What is it?" "I got the letter today. From an old friend in Texas, a man I rode with during my ranger days." Eli shifted, and she could feel the tension in his body. "He's asking if I want to come back. There's trouble down there, a gang causing problems, and they need experienced men." Clara's blood went cold. "You're leaving?" "No." The word was immediate, emphatic. That's what I'm trying to tell you. A year ago, 6 months ago, even I would have gone. That kind of trouble, that kind of fight, it's what I knew. It's what I was good at. He turned to face her fully. But I'm not that man anymore. I read that letter, and all I could think about was you and the children, about what I'd be leaving behind, about what I'd be risking. Eli. I wrote him back tonight. Told him I couldn't come. Told him I'd found something worth more than any fight. He cupped her face in his hands. I'm not going anywhere, Clara. Not now. Not ever. This is my home. You're my home. The relief that washed through her was so intense it left her shaky. She hadn't realized how much she'd been waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to take this happiness away like everything else had been taken. I love you, she whispered. I love you too. And I'm sorry if my past made you worry even for a moment. Those days are behind me. The only thing I want to fight for now is this family. She kissed him, then pouring all her gratitude and relief and love into the gesture. When they broke apart, she was smiling. The children would be devastated if you left. Tommy's already planning what kind of horse you're going to teach him to ride. Lily won't go to sleep unless you've checked under her bed for monsters. And Emma. Clara shook her head. Emma told me yesterday that she wants you to walk her down the aisle someday, when she's grown and gets married. Eli's eyes went suspiciously bright. She said, and I quote, Papa Eli is the kind of man I want to marry someday. Someone brave and kind who keeps his promises. He had to look away, blinking rapidly. That girl's going to be the death of me. She loves you. They all do. I love them too. More than I ever thought I could love anything again. They stayed on the porch until the moon rose high, talking about everything and nothing, making plans for the summer, for the years ahead. For the first time since William's death, Clara allowed herself to think about the future without fear. It stretched before her, not empty and threatening, but full of possibility. Summer arrived in a blaze of heat and growth, bringing with it the busiest season of the ranch year. Clara found herself working alongside Eli in ways she never had with William, not because he hadn't valued her contribution, but because the work of running a ranch together was different now. They were true partners, making decisions, jointly sharing burdens equally. The children grew too, in ways both visible and subtle. Tommy lost his first tooth and gained new confidence, no longer the frightened little boy who had huddled in his sister's arms during their flight through the blizzard. Lily's nightmares stopped entirely, replaced by dreams of horses and adventures that she shared excitedly at breakfast. Emma began talking about the future, about maybe becoming a teacher, like the one who was helping Lily, about traveling to see the ocean someday. And Clara herself was changing. She felt it in the way she moved through the world, no longer braced for disaster, no longer waiting for the next blow to fall. She laughed more easily now. She slept deeply and peacefully with Eli's arm around her. She looked in the mirror and recognized the woman looking back. One evening in late August, a visitor arrived at the ranch. Clara was in the garden when she heard the hoofbeats, and her old instincts had her reaching for the rifle before she saw who it was. Daniel Whitmore, her younger cousin, Silas's son, barely 20 years old, and looking more nervous than she'd ever seen him. Mrs. Holloway. He dismounted slowly, hat in hand. I hope I'm not intruding. Clara lowered the rifle, but didn't set it aside. Daniel. This is unexpected. I know. I should have written first, but He swallowed hard. I needed to come in person. There are things I need to say. Eli appeared from the barn, having heard the arrival. He moved to stand beside Clara, his presence a silent support. This is my husband, Eli Holloway, Clara said. Eli, this is Daniel Whitmore, Silas's boy. The two men regarded each other warily. Daniel looked like he wanted to sink into the ground. I came to apologize. He said, the words tumbling out. I knew what my father was planning. Not all of it, but enough. I should have warned you, should have done something, but I was scared, and I told myself it wasn't my place. His voice cracked. I watched him destroy your life. Aunt Clara and I didn't lift a finger to stop it. Clara's grip on the rifle tightened, then relaxed. She handed it to Eli and stepped toward her cousin. You were a boy, Daniel. Your father was a hard man to defy. I'm not a boy anymore. And I'm not him. Daniel met her eyes, desperation in his gaze. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to let me stay. But I needed you to know that I'm sorry. That I wish I'd been braver. That I think about what happened every single day. Clara studied him, this young man who looked so much like Silas, but who had clearly been wrestling with his own demons. She remembered him as a child, quiet and gentle, always more interested in books than in the rough games his father preferred. Whatever darkness lived in Silas had not taken root in his son. Come inside, she said finally. I think we have a lot to talk about. The conversation lasted hours, stretching through dinner and into the evening. Daniel told them everything he knew about Silas's schemes, about how long the plan had been in development, about the debts and desperation that had driven his father to such extremes. He spoke of his mother, who had died when he was young, and how Silas had never been the same after. It doesn't excuse anything, Daniel said. I know that. But I needed you to understand that he wasn't always a monster. Something broke inside him, and he never figured out how to fix it. Grief can do that to a person, Eli said quietly. Twist them into something they don't recognize. You sound like you know. I do. I came close to losing myself after someone I loved died. If I hadn't heard your aunt scream that night, found her and the children. Eli shook his head. I might have kept drifting until there was nothing left of me. Clara reached for his hand. But you didn't. No, because someone needed me, and that gave me a reason to fight my way back. Daniel looked between them, understanding dawning in his eyes. You saved each other. We did, Clara agreed. And if there's anything Silas's mistakes have taught me, it's that we can't change the past, but we can choose what we do with the future. She faced her cousin directly. What do you want, Daniel? Why did you really come here? I want to make amends, in whatever way I can. He straightened in his chair. My father left me some money, a small inheritance from my grandmother. I want you to have it. Not as payment for what happened, nothing could ever pay for that. But as a start, a way to help rebuild what he tried to destroy. I don't need your money, Daniel. I know, but I need to give it. His voice shook with emotion. Please, Aunt Clara, let me do this one thing. Let me prove that not all Whitmores are like my father. Clara was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. I won't take your inheritance. But if you want to help, there's something else you could do. Anything. Stay. Not forever, but for a while. Help us with the ranch. Let my children see that family doesn't have to mean betrayal. She glanced at Eli, who nodded his support. You're young, Daniel. You've got your whole life ahead of you. Don't let it be defined by your father's sins. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. You'd really let me stay after everything. Everyone deserves a chance to prove who they really are. That's what I learned this year. Clara smiled, and for the first time there was no bitterness in it when she thought of Silas. That's what Eli taught me. Daniel stayed. At first the children were wary, especially Emma, who remembered him from before, and associated him with her uncle's cruelty. But Daniel was patient, working alongside Eli without complaint, keeping his distance until trust was earned. It was Tommy who broke through first, as Tommy usually did. He found Daniel in the barn one day, carving a small wooden figure, and watched with fascination until Daniel offered to teach him. You're pretty good, Tommy declared after his own clumsy attempt. Papa Eli makes horses, but yours is a dog. It's supposed to be a wolf, actually. Wolves are scary, but you made it look nice. Daniel smiled his first genuine smile since arriving. "Thanks, partner." From there, acceptance grew. Lily decided Daniel wasn't so bad when he helped her rescue a kitten that had gotten stuck in the hayloft. Emma took longer, but eventually she found him reading one of her books, and they spent an entire afternoon discussing the story. By the time the first frost returned to Wyoming, Daniel had become part of the household, not replacing the family that had been, but adding to the one that was still growing. The anniversary of that terrible night came in December, and Clara found herself standing at the edge of the property, looking out at the land where she had once run for her life. Eli found her there, as he always seemed to find her when she needed him most. "A year ago today," she said softly. "I know. I've been thinking about it too. So much has changed. Sometimes I can barely remember who I was before." Eli stood beside her, solid and warm. "You were brave before. You're still brave now. The difference is that you're not alone anymore." Clara turned to face him. The man who had heard her scream and come running. The man who had stood against her brother, who had helped her find justice, who had become father to her children and partner to her in all things. "I love you." She said the words no longer new, but still carrying all the weight they ever had. "I love you too, hon." He pulled her close. "And I will love you every day for the rest of our lives. That's a promise, Clara Holloway." Behind them, the children's laughter rang out from the house. Tommy was chasing Lily through the yard, while Emma tried to catch them both. Daniel stood on the porch watching with a soft smile. And in the distance, the mountains rose against a winter sky, unchanging witnesses to all the joy and sorrow that had come before. Clara leaned into her husband's embrace and closed her eyes. The fear was gone, truly gone, replaced by a peace she had never expected to find again. She had fought for her children, for her home, for her very life. And she had won. Not because she was special, not because fate had decided to be kind, but because when everything seemed lost, she had refused to give up. Because she had run into a blizzard rather than surrender. Because she had trusted a stranger and let a broken man help put her broken world back together. That night, as the family gathered around the dinner table, Clara looked at each face in turn. Eli, her husband, her partner, her love. Emma, growing into a young woman of strength and grace. Lily, no longer afraid of shadows. Tommy, full of life and laughter. Daniel, finding redemption in service to others. This was her family, not the one she had been born into, not even the one she had first created, but the one that had been forged in the fire of their shared trials, tempered by loss and strengthened by love. Emma caught her looking and smiled. "What is it, Mama?" Clara reached out to squeeze her daughter's hand. "Nothing, sweetheart. I'm just grateful." "For what?" "For everything. For all of you. For second chances and new beginnings." Clara's voice grew stronger. "For learning that the worst night of your life can lead to the best days you've ever known." Eli raised his glass, and the others followed suit. "To family," he said. "To family," they echoed. And Clara Holloway, who had once run barefoot through a blizzard with nothing but her children and her courage, looked around the table and knew with absolute certainty that she had finally found her way home. The winter wind howled outside, but inside there was only warmth. Only love. Only the unshakable knowledge that whatever storms might come, they would face them together. She had been a frightened widow fleeing into the darkness. Now she was a woman who had reclaimed her life, protected her children, and built something beautiful from the ashes of everything she had lost. And that was a story worth telling.